classic movie Goodfellas? Then you can forget about serving on this jury. Brooklyn Federal Court is being very selective about the upcoming trial of 80-year-old alleged mobster Vincent Asaro for the 1978 Lufthansa heist. That $6 million caper was featured in Goodfellas. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen it. Everyone has. The court is making prospective jurors answer a questionnaire asking whether they've seen that film and other mafia movies and shows, not just that one, like The Godfather, The Sopranos. Legal experts say potential jurors could be swayed by the violence in Goodfellas, and they say that it's good to gauge a person's interest in the mob genre. So you can't be on this jury if, like me, you've seen all of those films at least 100 times. I could stand up and do any of the scenes right now, monologue out of them.
Do it.
How do you feel about the
Well,
Did they do a lot of that on Little House on the Prairie?
No, just was one of my
You don't remember the
favorites.
day the Engels family decided to go all mobster and blow the whole place away?
Francis is like a 2-year-old.
I am Italian.
There's two things.
there you
There's
go.
two
Yeah.
things at play here. Number one is, as a prosecutor or a defense attorney, you don't want the jurors to be relying on the facts of a movie, because this movie, Goodfellas, is specifically about this case, as opposed to the evidence
What
that
about
they
the
hear.
other ones? I mean,
but
the
the bigger
list.
one is, look, it's the inherent prejudice. Like, you just used the word on national television, mafia. Okay, there is a huge group of Italian American organizations that hate that word and wish it was banned and think it's the bane of the Italian American community. So they don't want people on that jury who think the average Italian American person isn't Antonin Scalia and Mario Cuomo. They want them to think that it's John Gotti.
Wait. You just made a huge leap there. So if you have watched
The Godfather,
Scarface, Donnie Brasco, Sopranos, Mob Wives,
Right,
you think that all Italians are mobsters?
Well, wait, hold on. What was it? Was it Bill Clinton who's referred to Mario Cuomo as a mafioso 25 years ago on a phone? Because he's an Italian American, he referred to Mario Cuomo as a mafioso. Because
What does that have to do with this?
Because as a defense attorney, you don't want a person who's a juror thinking that an Italian American is per se part of organized crime.
How do you get from people who love those movies, like myself, think all Italians are mobsters? I'm Italian. I don't think all Italians are mobsters.
Because you're educated and you're intelligent and you live a different lifestyle.
But that's crazy. So then, okay, I'm Russian, so I can't have anybody, if I were a defendant in a jury who's ever seen James Bond movies, because you automatically assume I'm sitting there like Spectre?
Look, it's not going to be anyone who's ever seen it. It's going to be what you would call the buffs, the people who like romanticize this whole thing.
So you threw them out. Isn't that your job to throw them off the jury?
But that's what we're talking about. That's exactly what this is.
But you're not even allowed to call them out.
Harris.
That's crazy.
I'm listening to Arthur because he spoke to the very issue that the big question that I had in my mind. It isn't that people are not free thinkers and that they can't watch these films and think for themselves. I think it's just these attorneys wanting to protect what they would consider something they can't control, and that's finding a character within that movie that might. Let me finish 1 second. Finding a character that might be like one of the people on trial. I mean, that's kind of how I hear you say.
And you're 100% correct. And then they relate reality to the movie, and that may not be accurate.
I agree with you most always. But this is just absurd. I mean, to Julie's point, where does it end? Almost every movie I've ever seen on Wall Street has falsely portrayed what actually happens on Wall Street.
Yes.
So if you were to rule on an insider trading scandal, you're saying that anybody in that jury could not have possibly watched any movie involving Wall Street?
While I'm selecting the jury, I want to know who's seen Wall Street and who's seen Greed and who's seen. I definitely want to know what's in. Look, this is what jury selection is. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're about to hear this case. Miss Francis, what newspapers do you read? What television shows do you watch? That's what jury selection is. That's what we do. Because I get an idea of who she is from those answers, and I decide whether I want you on my trial
I could see Goodfellas, because it's really specifically about the Lufthansa heist.
Yes, that's easy. That's easy. That's a no-brainer.
But The Godfather, The Sopranos, I mean, where does this end?
When you're trying an organized crime case, you don't want people who are so knowledgeable about a movie getting involved with reality and the evidence. You want the evidence to control, not the script of a movie.
Do you feel like you've been discriminated against as an Italian lawyer?
Of course, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely.
Why? What do you think people think about you?
Well, the common stereotype was you always had to go to a good Jewish lawyer, number one. The second thing was Italian Americans were never welcome in the white shoe law firms until very recently, maybe the last 20 years. When my grandfather graduated law school in 1933, the only job he could get was a city job where he stayed his whole career. Absolutely, 100%. You have to ask Antonin Scalia whether he was discriminated. It's in his book how he was discriminated from going into a white shoe law firm because he was an Italian American.
There's a lot of offensive stuff in there to go around.